Hey there guys, welcome to this What You Need to Know video on the Old Hunters DLC for Bloodborne. This video will be covering all of the main facts that have been let out so far about the DLC, and just the main story elements of Bloodborne that you should know going into the DLC. Think of this as a refresher course for those that haven't played Bloodborne in quite a while and want to get back on track with the story that has been given to us so far and what the DLC has in store. And obviously this video will include spoilers, so if you haven't finished Bloodborne and don't want the basics from the beginning to the end of the game ruined for you, I suggest you click away now. Alright, well, if you're still here, then we'll get started because we have some technical things about the DLC to go through first of all. So, to start off, some people may not know about this, but the DLC is actually 2 expansions put together into one. Initially, From Software were going to do 2 different DLC packs, but chose to do this instead, therefore giving us a veritably large expansion all in one on November 24th for Bloodborne. And I suppose they made this choice because of Dark Souls 2. People didn't really like waiting month to month for new DLC to come out. A lot of people, including myself, said they would have just rather the DLC come out all at once rather than been given to us over a 3-month span. But anyway, the initial release date for Bloodborne the Old Hunters DLC will be November 24th, 2015, just a few days away. And the entire expansion will only cost $19.99 USD. Apart from that, if you're still looking to buy Bloodborne itself, then they're coming out with a game bundle re-release with a steelbook cover for Bloodborne along with the DLC as a package on December 3rd in Japan. I'm not quite sure how long the worldwide release will be after that, but hopefully it's not too much longer. And lastly, a free patch will add the League as well as friendly NPC summons for everyone on November 20th. And that is even if you don't purchase the DLC, so think of it like the Scholar of the First Sin update for Dark Souls 2. Everyone got Aldia as the NPC and most of that content, although with this League update, you won't gain access to the DLC unless you purchase it, but you will gain access to those friendly NPCs and the League content. But moving on. For those that actually want to know about what the Old Hunters is vaguely going to be about, and I mean vaguely, this is just like an outline for what the DLC will encompass, they actually held a Q&A panel recently with the game's producer, I believe, and he answered some questions about the DLC. So I'm just quickly going to read off the answers from that question and answers panel and explain to you what the DLC will roughly be about. So the first question here is basically asking what we're asking already. What will the DLC be about? Well, the Old Hunters expansion depicts a nightmare world where the Old Hunters have been captured. So the Old Hunters apparently won't just be roaming around everywhere in the DLC. We'll actually be trying to rescue them from their captors, or at least that's what this answer makes it out to be. But then the question is, why have these hunters been captured, and for what purpose? The next question is about the gameplay and its technical capabilities, so can users who have installed the expansion interact online with other players who have not? And the answer to that is, just as it is now, all players will be able to interact online in areas from the original game, but only those who have purchased the DLC will be able to interact in the DLC areas, which is quite obvious and fair game. The next question goes on to ask, how exactly do you access the DLC from within the game? So once you reach a certain point in Bloodborne, an item called Eye of a Blood-Drunk Hunter appears in the hunter's dream. Once you have acquired this item, you will be able to access the newly added areas in the expansion. The way to access this DLC seems extremely similar to how From Software usually does their expansions, so accessing this DLC shouldn't be any different from how they've done it in previous games. And I'm just going to shotgun the last few questions in this panel. So, can you use the save data from a clear game? Yes, as long as you progress to a certain point in the game. Next, will DLC specific trophies be added? Yes, there will be all new trophies in the DLC. And lastly, will you be able to complete the story even if you don't play the DLC? Yes, you can still get to the end without playing the expansion. So now that all that technical stuff has been covered, we can get onto the actual content from the DLC, or at least some of it that's been mentioned so far, along with the main story of Bloodborne as your refresher course. So to start off, we'll go through the main story of Bloodborne and just dot point it, so we know what we're talking about when it comes to the DLC, and the bosses, equipment, and areas located in it. So essentially what we're going to be doing is just creating a little timeline of events, and we'll list all these events in chronological order, so from first to last. I've just created a quick flowchart of the timeline events in Bloodborne, or at least the perceived timeline of events in Bloodborne, as close as I could get without knowing what yet happens in the Old Hunters DLC. So first here we have the Outliers, the Great Ones and the Pthumerians, who are possibly beyond time and much older than Yharnam and the game itself, or the timeline of where the game takes place. Make sure you keep these guys in the back of your mind because they have a lot to do with the rest of the game. So moving along, next we have Byrgenwerth. Byrgenwerth is pretty much where all the problems in Bloodborne stem from, other than the Healing Church. Byrgenwerth was a school dedicated to teaching its students about the arcane properties of the universe that goes along with the Great Ones and insight. But then the heads of Byrgenwerth, Master Willem and Lawrence, became obsessed with their own ideals. So Byrgenwerth was responsible for experiments on contacting the Great Ones, trying to gain insight, and then also creating gods, as the leftover scholars from Byrgenwerth tried to do in Yahar'gul when creating the One Reborn. Next, we have the Old Blood. Now, not much is known about the Old Blood, including where it came from. It's theorized it either came from the Pthumerians or the Great Ones, but nothing is conclusive. So, with that being said, the scholars of Byrgenwerth, along with Master Willem and Lawrence, discovered an unknown relic/substance in the Hintertombs below Old Yharnam/Yharnam, as it would be known later on. And then Lawrence and Master Willem parted ways because of their differing ideals. Master Willem wanted to follow Byrgenwerth into discovering more about the Great Ones and etc., but then, on the other hand, Lawrence wanted to see what discoveries awaited him in the Old Blood, so he left and decided to found the Healing Church, which brings us to our next point. So, even though Master Willem warned Lawrence about using the Old Blood and what side effects could come from it, Lawrence ignored those warnings and incepted the idea for the Healing Church. Now, the thing is, it's not confirmed, but the Healing Church didn't arise during this time of Old Yharnam. I'm pretty sure the Healing Church came after Old Yharnam, as Old Yharnam served as a test for the Old Blood. The only reason that the Healing Church is before Old Yharnam in the timeline is because I wasn't sure if it was confirmed that the Healing Church was founded either before or after Old Yharnam. Either way though, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really matter when the church was founded. All that matters is that it was founded, and that the idea of the Healing Church became a reality because of Lawrence. Though my guess is that the Healing Church was in a sort of prototype phase during the events of Old Yharnam, testing what the Old Blood could do and putting it to use to experiment on the people of Old Yharnam, therefore tearing that city apart. And it was only after the events of Old Yharnam that the Healing Church was given its legitimate name and purpose. And that all makes sense to me because if the people of Yharnam, the new Yharnam that was built on top of Old Yharnam, found out that the Healing Church were the same people that poisoned the water supply in Old Yharnam, I don't think I would trust that organization anymore either. So I think that the Healing Church was around during the time of Old Yharnam, which is obvious because it was, although not in name. And they were the ones to poison the water supply, and in turn became the Healing Church, albeit they would be sporting a new face and identity in the new Yharnam. So now that that's all been cleared up, we can move on to what actually happened in Old Yharnam and the rise of the Hunters. So essentially, Old Yharnam's water supply was poisoned, and an early onset form of the Scourge began to break out in Old Yharnam. And because of the danger this put the civilians in, one man took up his weapons, that man being Gehrman, and decided to start hunting the infected down in an effort to defeat the outbreak. But this early form of the Scourge became too potent, so everyone in Old Yharnam had to be evacuated, and then in a last-ditch effort to defeat the infection, they burnt Old Yharnam to the ground on that moonlit night. And since that day, Old Yharnam has been left abandoned, or so it would seem. Some of the Powder Keg hunters, including Jura, have stayed behind in Old Yharnam to defend the beasts that still live in Old Yharnam, because apparently they aren't hurting anyone, so as long as they stay down here and everyone else stays up there, they will be of no consequence to you. Anyway, moving on. Next we have the newly built Yharnam on top of Old Yharnam, so a new city is built on top of the old one. Blood administration continues and is even more prominent than before. Although, because of this, history repeats itself and the Scourge begins anew, on a much, much larger scale, and even infects those who created it in the first place. And since Lawrence became infected by the Scourge that he created, there was almost no way of stopping it. He was most likely the only one who could have given Yharnam a fighting chance. That is, if he even wanted to help, which he may not have. Either way, at the very start of this new outbreak, the Healing Church asked Gehrman to start guiding Healing Church members to be hunters, and of course, the first of these Healing Church hunters was Ludwig. You'll want to remember his name for the DLC. Anyway, the next event that should take place in the timeline is the DLC, and that's just by logical conclusion, because the DLC seems to take place in a time where the old hunters are still alive, so therefore involves some sort of time travel concept, so it should be before the events of the main game. I mean, you'll get to the DLC in the main game, but then it'll probably send you back through time, sort of like it does in Dark Souls 1 with that DLC. So yeah, but we still don't know all that much about the DLC. All we know is that Ludwig is known to be a boss in the DLC, the old hunters have been captured, and you're seemingly traveling back through time into a nightmare version of Yharnam. And of course, after that, we have the events of the main game, the player going through Yharnam during the Scourge of the Beast, or what seems to be a lower end of the Scourge of the Beast, since it's been around for a while already. However, there are also a few more outliers we have to talk about quickly before we wrap up this segment, which are Carol Runes, the Hunter's Dream, and Nightmares. So for those that have come across Carol Runes in the game, those are the words of the Great Ones, or the words of the gods, and basically there is one for Hunter as well, so the question arises, and it's theorized upon, if you're born a hunter or if you're made a hunter through a contract. But once you are a hunter, you gain access to the Hunter's Dream, where Gehrman awaits. The dream is it's inconclusive in details really. It's owned by Gehrman, like Gehrman is the essence of the dream, and he is the catalyst for it. And if Gehrman dies, the dream, it seems as if it can be sustained, but there's a lot that goes on to do with the dream, and it's very hard to discern what is fact and what is fiction with it. So I'd rather not get into heavy lore details in this video, just because the dream and the ideas surrounding it get very, very convoluted. And honestly, this video is probably going to be longer than I anticipated anyway, so yeah. Anyway, the nightmares are basically the same sort of thing as a dream, but it's on the opposite end of the spectrum. So instead of being a safer place, it's a place filled with chaos and, well, nightmares essentially. And for those asking how dreams and nightmares originate in the Bloodborne universe, apparently it's to do with Great Ones, or so it would seem. The Hunter's Dream, even though there is a Great One within it, it seems as if there is something that keeps the dream going even after that Great One is defeated. So there's a theory that Dol is a Great One, but like I said, I'm not going to go into that stuff right now. And that, my friends, is pretty much all you need to know to dive straight into Bloodborne: The Old Hunters DLC. I did leave a few little details out to do with the contents of the DLC, like item names and area names, but that's because I don't want to spoil your first pass through the DLC. So knowing what those areas are called and what those item and weapon names are called could, even in a small way, spoil that experience for you, and I don't want that. But if you do want to know those things, I'll put a link down to all my sources for this video, including the wiki article that has the weapon, item, and area names in it in the description. And once again everyone, thank you so much for keeping up the continued support and watching this video. It really means a lot to me, and it just drives me all that more to keep creating videos for you guys. If you guys do want more Bloodborne content, just let me know in the comments, because that way I know that people are going to watch it. And whether it's lore videos or an in-depth walkthrough of Bloodborne, at least I'll know that there are some of you out there that are in my viewership that will watch that content. I'm pretty tied up right now doing Dark Souls 1 and 2 content, but if you guys really want more Bloodborne stuff, then really just let me know, whether it's in a personal message or the comments, and I'll try to squeeze in some Bloodborne videos every now and then. But once again, thank you so much for watching everyone. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all next time.